千里之行，始于足下。A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Welcome to Tao Talks with Derek Lin, where we take a deep dive into the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. I would like to extend a warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining us. I would like to invite you to center your thoughts and direct your attention to this moment in time, to the here and now, to be fully present and mindfully aware as we all ready ourselves for this sacred process in the Tao with one another. Now, without further ado, let's continue with Tao Te Ching 25. As we talked about previously, the name of this chapter is Formlessly Created. That is a pretty literal rendering of the original title, which you see in the middle of the slide. The first character, that's the one to the left, that is formless. The character in the middle is created or complete, and the character on the right is the character for chapter. The meaning, as we talked about, of this title comes from the first line of the chapter, describing how the Tao is formless. It is the essence of the void, and yet it is the source of creation. Being formless, the Tao cannot be seen, heard, or felt. There's a lot more to the Tao that will be described by Lao Tzu, and that is the theme that we will delve into. That is the subject for us to focus on. Here's another look at the overall chapter itself. It is relatively long at 22 lines. We previously divided this up into sections. We were able to identify 4 main sections, as well as a couplet within the first section, which divides it up even further. So in our previous discussion, we looked at the beginning, and we were able to make our way to roughly the middle of the chapter. We ended in this position at line 12. In the first section that we talked about, we discussed the Tao being formless, the source of everything, as suggested by the title. We also talked about the other characteristics of the Tao, that the Tao is continuously circulating. It never stops. And because it is the source of everything, Lao Tzu says we can think of it as the mother of the world. Lao Tzu also remarked that we do not know its name, and that is why we're forced to call it Tao. And Lao Tzu also mentioned we do not know that much about the Tao. If forced to describe it, he would call it great. So there are 2 main ideas for us to pick up on and continue with. The greatness of the Tao in terms of the various aspects of existence, and then the circle, the circular motion of the Tao manifesting everywhere. And previously, we were able to get as far as line 12, which, as you can see in this slide, it says receding means returning. This is the slide where we ended our discussion in our last meeting. It is on the great circle of the Tao. The 3 lines that you see ending in 12, starting on line 10, describes how the Tao passes, recedes from view, and then comes back, describing a great circle. As I mentioned, the circle manifests everywhere in existence. So last time, we talked about how the learning process itself is circular. You go through cycles whenever you learn anything. And we use this table here to talk about picking up on the next level of skill or knowledge. And the example that we used was playing a musical instrument, the piano. In any kind of learning, including practicing a song on the piano, initially, we do not know about the skill, but then we hear the song and we become aware of it and we want to learn how to play that piece. So we transition from unaware to aware. Then we transition from unskilled to skilled by practicing. Then we go back once we have practiced so much that the skill becomes second nature. We transition from aware back to unaware, in the sense that you can simply play the piece from memory. You are so familiar with the piece, your hands know what to do. It sounds really good, and you can freely express yourself by playing the piece according to the way you feel. A particular passage, musically, you can play either with passion or gentleness. You can vary the speed slightly in expression of your emotions. So these are the freedom that come with the mastery of a subject. And this prepares you for the next level of learning, another piece of music, perhaps more difficult, that you also wish to master. And the circle continues. And lastly, the final point that I mentioned is that this is how the circular shape looks when you look at it from the top. Every time you go around in a circle back to the beginning, which is the unaware and unskilled, you are at a higher level than you were previously. And the next circular motion around, you end up higher again. So it actually looks like a spiral or spring, the shape of a spring. From the side, you can see it. From the top, it just looks like a circle. And I mentioned that orbital mechanics, if the orbit of a heavenly body happens to be perpendicular to the motion of the planetary body that it is going around, then it forms that spiral shape as well. So this is the Tao. So to pick it up from that point and to continue into the next line, or to make a further point about the current line. The other most important thing to talk about when it comes to the Great Circle is when it comes to everything recycling and reused. Everything in nature is always acting that way, recycled and reused. So think of the Great Circle as the ultimate recycling of everything. All the atoms that make up all the matter in existence. Science tells us that, for instance, all the atoms that make up the cells of the body, the human body, they come from the crucible of exploding stars billions of years ago. So in this slide, we begin with this. Science tells us all things are made up of endlessly recycled molecules. As Lao Tzu says, circulating and ceaseless. Of course, ancient sages had no knowledge of the molecules that make up everything, including the human body. They were just trying to intuitively reason and divined a law that governs all of nature, and they were right. The endlessly recycled molecules, those would be certainly the case with the human body. Science tells us the nitrogen in our DNA, the calcium in our teeth and bones, the iron in our blood, these all come from exploding stars, the stars that had gone nova billions of years ago. So even at the microscopic scales of existence, we're talking molecules and particles that are too small to be perceptible without instruments. They are on the Great Circle. They are being recycled from one thing to the next. This is why astronomer Carl Sagan describes humans as made of star stuff. Physicist Lawrence Krauss describes the body as composed of stardust. So even though you and I are only decades old in terms of age in this world, we're all made up of matter that directly connect us to the beginning of the universe billions of years ago. We're part of the circulating and ceaseless process of universal recycling, the Great Circle. So we know that when someone dies, the body decomposes and all the molecules that made up the body gets recycled again. I would now like to challenge all of us to further expand our thinking beyond the tangible material realm to the realm of the intangible thoughts and spirituality. That is the challenge. So we are now talking about the gray circle of consciousness. Now, when it comes to consciousness, we should note we today do not have a complete understanding of human consciousness, just like no one completely understands the Tao. But just like the ancient sages, you and I can observe and reason. To do that, I would like to read you a quote. It is the last two paragraphs from my book, The Tao of Joy Every Day. The book is one page per day, so the last page is day 365. Here's what the last two paragraphs say. Contemplate the great circles of existence. If everything comes to a beginning when it reaches the end, then why should human consciousness be any different? Some may harbor fears that awareness will end in oblivion upon the death of the body. But everywhere we look, the entire universe is telling us the exact opposite. The end of life is but the completion of one circle and the starting point of another. A new circle filled with potentialities and possibilities. So in the previous slide, we looked at how if every bit of your body is composed of recycled particles, then existence itself has an incredible efficiency to it. The molecules and energy of your physical self, they just go through transformations. They're not truly lost. Everything serves a purpose, and there is little waste. What if we consider the mind, not just the body? Think about how you have spent your life so far, refining your own consciousness. You have learned quite a few lessons. So what if, when you die, the atoms that make up your body become recycled to be used for something else? As your body decomposes, perhaps you are becoming fertilizer for plants. That's a common scenario. But what if your consciousness is simply no more? Would that not be an incredible waste of time and effort that you have invested into yourself? If that is truly the case, then it would be the only exception in the totality of existence to the rule of circles, efficiency, transformation, and reuse. We don't really have any reason to think it would be an exception. Indeed, based on everything we witness and observe in life, you and I have every reason to believe that human consciousness would not be the exception, but would follow the same Tao, just like everything else. So this is why Lao Tzu wrote, great means passing, passing means receding, receding means returning, forming the great circle, where the end is also the beginning. Therefore, a lifetime coming to an end only means another journey, another lifetime will be waiting for you when you are ready. Continuing on, we're now talking about the greats, the four greats. This begins on line 13. Line 13 says, therefore, the Tao is great. And why is the Tao great? It is great because of all the aspects that we have discussed so far. What are the aspects? Well, the Tao is the starting point of everything in existence. It is usually formulated in the other direction. Whatever it is that had to be the starting point of everything, it's a mystery. We don't know everything about it. We don't know anything about it, but we'll just call it the Tao. And number two, it is the source of continuing creation that is happening now. So what I mean is, creation was not just a one-time only genesis of the universe. Creation is happening all the time, even as we speak. Even though we know very little about the source, the origin, the beginning, what we can understand about it, what we can figure out, the ideas, the wisdom, the truisms, they become life-changing for us. So when I talk about how creation is continuous and happening now, I am not referring to life forms being born. I'm talking about absolutely everything, tangible and intangible, and at different scales, from the very big to the very small and back again. So on the intangible side, even as we are talking right now, countless ideas are surfacing in the minds of 8 billion humans around the world. These are not things. These are thoughts that we cannot touch. But they're real because you and I have ideas also. We know the reality of it. I mentioned different scales, from the very big to the very small and back again. Well, right now, everywhere in the cosmos, stellar evolution continues its progress, just as it has for 14 billion years. So the Great Circle manifests everywhere. That's part of the greatness of the Tao. The Tao is the timeless, changeless principle underlying reality. It is the principle that ties everything together, and we're going to see why that is as we delve further into this chapter. It has been said that all are connected as one at the most fundamental level of reality. This is an eternal truth. It is the way it has always been and will always be. And that's why in my last bullet point here, I say it is timeless and changeless. Line 14. Line 14 says, heaven is great. So the ancients looked up in the sky. They could see the clouds. They could see the sun and the moon. They could see at nighttime the stars. So to the ancients, these were all part of heaven. Today, we know the vastness of the universe goes well beyond human comprehension. The skies of the earth, the atmosphere, that is already vast. But it's nothing. It is almost less than nothing when we compare it to the universe beyond the atmosphere. Indeed, we talk about the observable universe, the part of the universe that we can see extending all the way by using our most powerful telescopes. What we can observe, the observable universe, it would take light 93 billion years to go from one end of it to the other. 93 billion years. And the actual totality of the universe would even be greater than that. Based on our most updated understanding, we already know the observable universe is larger than we can imagine. The human mind is limited. The entire universe extends well beyond what we can observe. Physicist Brian Greene says if we scale down the entire universe to the size of planet Earth, then the observable universe, 93 billion light years across, that whole thing will be smaller than a grain of sand. It just means you and I, we are a tiny speck of a tiny speck. Next line, line 15. Earth is great. So even though our world, this Earth, is insignificant in the cosmos, it is still big for us. When we use transportation, cars, planes, boats, and so on, whatever transportation we use, whatever speed we can achieve, it will still take a long time by human reckoning for us to get anywhere because the world is so vast. So the scale of it, that is something that we can appreciate whenever we take a road trip. Just driving across the landscape for hours and hours, not seeing a whole lot, we begin to feel the vastness, not just an intellectual understanding. And much of the landscape that we travel through is devoid of human presence because population centers are much more densely packed. And yet, the whole world is still the stage for all the drama of life to unfold. In this world, there's so much going on all the time. Most of it we will never know. For instance, we will never know the overwhelming majority of all the people in this world. If we come across 80,000 people over an entire lifetime, that's a lot of people already. We can't keep track of all of them. 80,000 people would still be 0.001% of the total world population. Now, what about in ancient times? Without the modern means of transportation or science, Tao sages of antiquity were nevertheless aware of the huge scale of the world in which we live. In fact, Zhuangzi wrote a story to express this concept directly. It is from chapter 17 of the Zhuangzi classic, part of the outer chapters section. The name of the chapter is Autumn Floods, and I have an excerpt from Autumn Floods called Heaven and Earth. So, once upon a time in ancient China, there was a guardian spirit of the river. He was watching over the water of his river as it flows out to the ocean. Everything was as it should be. So the river spirit was content and satisfied. He thought about how big his river was. He felt proud. So he followed the flow of the river to the ocean. There, he saw that the ocean was so big that he could not see the end of it. With his river, he could stand on one side and see the other side. Suddenly, the spirit of the river was deflated. He said out loud, he said he was foolish to even think his river was big, because the ocean was unimaginably bigger than his river. When the god of the northern sea heard him say this, he responded. He looked at the humility expressed by the river spirit favorably. Because the river spirit was wise enough to realize that he had been arrogant, the god of the northern sea said it was possible for the two of them to have a conversation. The god of the northern sea would not bother speaking to someone who was arrogant and therefore not receptive to the Tao. So as they were having this conversation, part of it was about the relative scale of all things in creation. Now, the river spirit already thought the ocean was unimaginably big compared to his river. But the northern sea told him the ocean was nothing compared to heaven and earth. Here is what he said. He said, "My existence between heaven and earth is like a small rock or a small piece of wood in a great mountain. Seeing this smallness in myself, I find it impossible to be arrogant." Then he said, "If the ocean is contained within heaven and earth, then would it not be like a small puddle in a vast marsh? If the land is contained within the ocean, then would it not be like a grain of rice in a large warehouse?" Hearing these comparisons of scales stunned the river spirit. He had already been feeling humble when they started their conversation. Now he saw that the truth was even greater and grander than he imagined. Slowly but surely, he began to appreciate the true magnificence of creation. The end. The Tao of this story is that through a series of comparisons, the Northern Sea laid out the relative scales of everything, its different levels of vastness. As I mentioned, the river spirit was proud that his river was so wide that from one side of it, you could barely see the other side. But then the river is a small part of the land. So the reasoning is that the land must be much bigger. But then the land is contained within the ocean. So of course, the ocean is much bigger. The ocean itself is contained within heaven and earth, like the Northern Sea said. So again, much, much bigger. To look at it in the other direction, the Northern Sea said, I am tiny compared to heaven and earth. The land is tiny compared to me. The river is tiny compared to the land. So what Zhuangzi is trying to convey is clear. We human beings are ever more tiny compared to a river. So if even the ocean is realizing its own insignificance, then we human beings have even less reason to be arrogant, because we're so many magnitudes smaller than heaven and earth, so much smaller it boggles the mind. It is almost inconceivable. So in the Tao, it is not about rules or commandments, it is about clarity. To see things clearly, like we're doing now, with the scales of existence. This is a perfect example. When you see the scope of creation, you begin to really put everything into perspective. Whatever arrogance we may have felt, it'll fade away naturally. Nobody has to tell us to be humble when the truth of it all is humbling enough. So this is better and more effective and more lasting than a commandment. Instead of thou shalt be humble and then obeying the commandment, it's better just to see why we should be humble. Commandments are not as effective because when people are ordered to be a certain way, after a while, they are going to forget. They will need to be reminders. So the Tao approach is quite different. Once we see the truth, we cannot unsee it. It becomes a part of you. It expands your mind. And this is why the Tao has the power to change your life by changing how you think and therefore changing your consciousness. If we follow the path correctly, this personal transformation will be permanent. You literally become a different person. So this is the meaning of the story. The river spirit is really you and me. And together, we have reached the great ocean of the Tao. We're just beginning to see the infinite reaches of existence. And we can see now the quote from Lao Tzu. Heaven is great, earth is great. This is an incredible understatement. We might not realize how much it understated reality previously, but now we can see it. So the last of the four grades is line 16. The sovereign is also great. Let me single out the first character, Wang, for special attention. Here's the character. This character is often translated as king, meaning the ruling authority. What it really is, it is the sovereign power over one's life. So king and sovereign, what is the difference? In my opinion, sovereign is a more accurate way to understand the meaning of the original. King is specific to the male gender. Sovereign is gender neutral, so it is a better fit for everyone. So the sovereign power over one's own life, that is the sovereignty. Without this sovereign power, you would be helplessly subject to the mercy of fate because you do not feel like you're in charge or in control. This describes people who lack a meaningful purpose or direction in life. Sometimes they're described as lost souls because they are drifting through life aimlessly, just going through the motions. So what if you have sovereign power over your own life? With sovereignty, you can determine the direction of your destiny. This describes the people who have meaningful purpose and direction in life. They know where they're going. They have a vision for the future. Therefore, they are actively involved in living fully. And this is why Lao Tzu says it is also great. We are now moving on from line 16 to line 17. Line 17 says there are 4 greats in the universe. I want to single out the first character for explanation. This character literally means the domain, and metaphorically, it is being used to represent all of existence. So, that being the case, translating this as the universe or existence or just domain, all 3 will be correct and acceptable. We'll stick to the sense of it for now, keeping in mind that this just means everything, universally, everything in existence. So this line that says there are 4 greats in the universe is a summary of the previous 4 lines. And I want to depict this as a graphic to illustrate the meaning. We start with you, assuming that you are the sovereign of your own life because, of course, you are. Most of the time, people who feel that they are not in control of their lives, it is only because they have yet to realize that they have the sovereignty as a birthright. They have not seized upon what is rightfully theirs, to have mastery over their own lives. The next level of great is Earth, here depicted as the world. So the human being, the sovereign, the you in this scheme, the human being is contained within the world, which is Earth. Then the world itself is contained by heaven, here depicted as the cosmos. And finally, there's the Tao. The cosmos is contained within the Tao. Therefore, the 4 greats are the Tao is great, starting from the right-hand side. Heaven is great, that's the cosmos. Earth is great, that's the world. And the sovereign is great, that will be you. Now, the sovereign is singled out by Lao Tzu for special attention. Line 18 says, and the sovereign occupies one of them. So this is a reiteration. It is a special underlining or showcase of one of the four greats. This is being singled out to emphasize the central importance of sovereignty or you in your life. So the sovereign being in the domain means your self-nature is fully present. To be fully present is crucial. It's crucial to life, and that is why it is being reiterated. And the greatness here is referring to significance and importance. And when it comes to the mind, having present moment mindful awareness is just as significant or important as the Tao, heaven and earth. When one is unaware or less aware, that is, if someone is easily distracted, having no clarity on life itself, then that person cannot be great. So the self in this context is not the physical being, but the awareness. So this is the Tao of you. Lao Tzu is specifically pointing to the true essence of the individual. As we have already seen in the previous lines, the physical manifestation, the body of a human being, a person, is smaller than small. Compared to the vastness of everything else, it is just so little as to be beyond description. We can say, as Lao Tzu has, it is the smallest or the most trivial of all. And that's why the sovereign, as we're talking about the power of one's own life, it is the spiritual side of things. So here, what we have is that the body is the least significant, but your true self is the most significant. After all, nothing really has any meaning without the true self. So with this concept, there is a teaching from the sixth patriarch that can give us the clearest possible understanding. The sovereign. This comes from the Platform Sutra of the sixth patriarch. And here's what Huineng has said. The mind is the ground. Self-nature is the sovereign. The sovereign lives upon the ground of the mind. Huineng continues. When self-nature is present, the sovereign is present. When self-nature is absent, the sovereign is gone. Then Huineng concludes. When self-nature is present, the body and mind persist. When self-nature is absent, the body and mind perish. So let's delve deeper into this. The mind is your thoughts, memories, and emotions. I would like everyone to notice that Huineng, the sixth patriarch, is clearly stating that self-nature is not the mind. it is the driving principle of the mind. So there is a tendency that sometimes people will equate the mind, thoughts, memories, and emotions to the true self. But the true self is really more like the concept of the soul. The mind becomes like a tool for the soul to utilize, like the relationship between the car and the driver within the car. So in this passage, we see that from a slightly different perspective, the sixth patriarch is using the ground as his metaphor, and Lao Tzu uses the term domain. So the self-nature being present is like Lao Tzu saying that the sovereign is within the domain. So we can think of self-nature as the spiritual self or the soul, as I mentioned. It is the common linkage in the two explanations about the essence of a human being. Both Sixth Patriarch and Lao Tzu point to this essence of the human being as the ruler, as the sovereign. So this is not a strange or unusual concept. It is one of the key ideas in Eastern thought. So your spirit resides within your mind, like the driver inside a vehicle. It has authority over your mind. So Lao Tzu says, well, that's the king within the domain, and the sixth patriarch says it is the king ruling the land of the mind. So the details and the style of expression may be a little bit different, but the meaning is exactly the same. When you are in alignment with your spiritual self, with your essence, you wield sovereign power over your life. That is the message from the Tao Te Ching. Then, sixth patriarch adds, you become stronger in body and mind. You thrive and flourish in your life. You live in a soulful and spiritual way. But when you are not in alignment with your spiritual self, the sixth patriarch says that's when the sovereign is absent. You feel powerless and hopeless in your life. You become weaker in body and mind. Everything in your life goes downhill. Your existence, you live a life that is soulless, devoid of spirituality. And that's why we point to that inner essence as the most significant. Although it may seem like a paradox to say that you're both the least significant and the most significant at the same time. I think that when you and I delve deeper into this teaching, the paradox just fades away. So it is not so much the physical being of the human that is great. It is about the importance of self-nature. Now, although it's quite true, as we have described the vastness of existence, we think about that, we see how small we really are, we're almost fading into nothingness. But at the same time, your awareness, your consciousness, that puts you in the center of it all. So at the very least, it makes you the greatest significance to yourself. So when it comes to the self, you answer only to yourself. You're ultimately responsible only for yourself. You cannot take responsibility for others. Only yourself. But for you, you have the absolute power and right to determine what external events mean to you. That being the case, you can choose the meaning that is the most empowering to your own benefit. You also have the absolute power and right to determine how you act or react to external events. And that being the case, you can choose the action or reaction that is the most empowering course of action. Now, we may as well all do this, choose the empowerment, because you and I have to stick around for quite a while in this world. While we do, you never have to be the victim, because in truth, you are always in control, or you can always take control. You are therefore never without hope. And that is the reason for your greatness. That is why you are great. As Lao Tzu says, there are 4 grades in the universe, and the sovereign occupies one of them. Lao Tzu, as well as other great sages throughout history, they are expressing the recognition and acknowledgement of the true potential for greatness within you. The Buddha nature inside of you, so to speak. To recognize and acknowledge this greatness is to wield the power and accept total responsibility to be in control of yourself, your life, and your journey. Moving on to line 19. Line 19 says, humans follow the laws of Earth. We're going to start by noting that the 4 lines all have the same character as the second character, and then focus our attention on that to start with. This character is fa. The meaning of this character, it can mean law or principle, dharma in Buddhism. Here, it is used not as a noun, as you see here in the meaning, but as a verb. The verb is to act within the law, or to follow a principle, to model the characteristics. So in this context, the verb meaning is extrapolated to following. And Lao Tzu is using this character to connect the various levels of existence, the 4 grades that we have seen. So now we're ready to talk about those connections, starting with humans follow the laws of Earth. This can also be interpreted as humans emulate the goodness of the Earth, model the characteristics of the Earth. And this is because we benefit from the goodness of the Earth. Therefore, number 1, we emulate the nurturing nature of the world in caring for all living things, the way it provides nurturing abundance to the myriad things. When we follow this, we are cultivating the virtue of giving and generosity, sharing all the goodness that life has to offer. Second, we find ourselves inspired by its non-contentious stability. The earth is simply there. It is tranquil, it is at peace, it contends against no one. It makes all of its resources available to us without demanding anything in return. So the question is, can we follow the giving nature of the earth also without expecting recognition, rewards, or anything in return? And yet another characteristic to model, we want to be open and accommodating of others, like the valley. The valley is a recurring metaphor within the Tao. The aspiration is to follow the way the valley provides space for a diverse ecology to thrive. We can learn from the many examples of harmonious coexistence within that ecosphere. In daily life, we can be more tolerant of others who may be different from us. And lastly, emulating the earth, we are grounded and humble in learning from nature. In the Tao Te Ching, the earth is what provides the lowest place for water to flow into. And it is also describing how streams flow into a river and rivers flow into the ocean. The ocean receives from all because it is lower than any other. So this is the symbol of humility. There is a lot that we can learn from the earth. The other aspect of this is that we have to conform to the earth. We have to work with what we find as we live and travel upon the earth. And this is because a lot of where and how we live depends on the physical setting. After all, human beings are earthbound, so we all have to take our surroundings into account in everything we do. How we travel around depends on distance and geography, and those are attributes of the earth. When it comes to where we live, it isn't just a random choice, like anywhere will do. From the beginning of human history, we've had boundaries, which could be tribal, political, or cultural. And these boundaries would oftentimes conform to landscape features. Mountains become walls between groups of people. Rivers could mark separation of territory. Forests and deserts would be natural buffers between various zones of humanity. We have always been guided by the land in determining where to live, where we can thrive. We want to build near water sources like rivers, lakes, or coastlines for drinking, irrigation, for transportation. And we avoid cliffs or floodplains because we want to be safe when we choose a place to reside. We also want fertile soil for planting, for farming, agriculture. We want temperate climate for comfort. In short, we want access to natural resources. And this is why human beings must follow the laws of the earth in the sense that we observe the land and choose the places where conditions are good or favorable to us. The choice, again, is not random. And when we talked about traveling, the landscape itself, the shape of it, it determines the path that we can take to go from one place to another. It'll determine the kind of transportation we take, traveling over the land or by sea. It determines the length of the journey because of distance. If we travel over land, we can see how the roads follow natural contours. Valleys, ridgelines, riverbanks, and we can go through the mountain range through a pass. We can find ourselves going over a river crossing. And these all become natural corridors for movement. This is the basis for the Tao as a metaphor for life, fate, and destiny. Traveling through life is the journey. It's a travel metaphor. It is also the basis for feng shui. Feng shui is composed of two characters. Feng, the first one, is the wind. So in ancient times, it was observed that one should not build too high up in the mountain where the winds will be too strong. What about shui, water? Since ancient times, it was a practical wisdom to not build too far from sources of water. And there are many other considerations as well. But the most important thing to note is that there is a reason behind every principle of rule of feng shui. Today, the practice of feng shui has veered away from the ancient practical beginnings. That is because people tend to forget the original ideas that were out of pragmatism, practical considerations. And that's why more and more they start talking in terms of metaphysical energies. This does not change that the original, purest form of feng shui, the Tao, is practical and sensible. It's based on what makes sense and what is proven in everyday reality. Nothing in the principles of the Tao is random. It's all based on reasoning. Line 20, Earth follows the laws of heaven. This is another way to say the earth follows heaven's lead. The earth naturally will do that following the patterns of heavenly movements in many different ways, such as the seasonal changes signal transformation all across the land. The 4 seasons of heaven have corresponding transitions. Spring brings warmth. It signals the sprouting of seeds, the blooming of flowers. Summer signals the peak of growth. It brings sunlight, energy, and activities. Autumn prompts the harvest of crops and the turning of the leaves. Winter brings stillness, rest, regeneration. The changing of seasons, which is heaven, determines the timing for human activities like planting and harvesting, which is earth. Yet another aspect of this, of the earth following heaven, is that weather, which is a heavenly force, weather will shape the earth over time. Constantly changing weather over thousands of years shape the terrain through erosion from exposure to the elements. And there's so many examples. For instance, temperature changes will drive the winds. They can form and melt glaciers. Rain and storms, also formed by atmospheric conditions, wash over the landscape. They sculpt the earth slowly but inevitably. So this is earth following the laws of heaven at a geological scale. The earth is carved and chiseled by heaven over years and years. And lastly, the timing of heaven drives activities of the myriad things. Life on earth aligns with the natural rhythm of heaven. During the day, there's activity. At night, inactivity. And of course, for nocturnal creatures, they are active at night. They too are following the natural rhythm of heaven. The monthly cycles, lunar cycle, directly affect the ebb and flow of tides. Seasonal changes, as we have talked about, they also affect the migration of animals or hibernation based on seasonal cues. So whether it's temperature or rain, it has a profound impact. Rain brings the water that will nourish our plants and animals as well. There is a reason for everything we observe on Earth. More often than not, it can be traced to heaven. Again, nothing is random. There is a reason behind it. Line 21. Heaven follows the laws of Tao. So this is saying heaven must follow the Tao, and the more we know about the world, the more we can see that this is true. Heaven will never move in an arbitrary way. It follows the Tao in terms of natural laws. So at the level of the earth, we have meteorology, which is weather patterns, climate predictions. These don't just happen. They are based on natural laws of interacting forces. The more we know them, the better we're able to predict them. As time goes on, forecasts become more accurate, and all based on known scientific principles. When it comes to astronomy, since ancient times, human beings have identified and recorded the movements of heavenly bodies. They conform to natural laws. They are predictable. Observation of the cosmos would not just be the stars and planets. It would also be cosmology, astrophysics, past, present, and future of the universe. This is more the domain of modern science, leading to understanding of the universe in the distant past as well as its fate in the distant future. So we may not understand everything yet, but we do understand enough to see for all that we observed, there's an underlying cause and it makes sense. There are reasons behind all these manifestations, even if we don't fully understand what's going on. History tells us we did not know that much centuries ago. We know more now, and we will know even more in the centuries ahead of us. So it is the same with our lives. We may not understand everything that's going on in our lives right now, but if we continue to cultivate the Tao, we can be sure that we will understand life more and more, and we will be able to handle its challenges better and better. So in the last of the connections, we have line 22. Tao follows the laws of nature. This is another way to say the Tao follows itself. And this is because the nature of the Tao is nature itself. As such, there is only pure naturalness without contrivance or interference. This naturalness is effortless, it is spontaneous, it is unforced. It doesn't try to do anything, but nothing is left undone. So when we talk about Tao in nature, I want to be very careful in noting that we're not talking about two separate things. The Tao is nature. Nature is the Tao. They are synonymous. So when we talk about the Tao following itself, it is an affirmation. It is a reference to the great circle of the Tao. And then one more thing to note is that we, human beings, we are part of nature. But nature does not require the continuing existence of humans. The Tao doesn't need us. The universe continues on with or without humanity. At our personal level, at the level of our personal interactions, this means the world does not need me. The world will continue on with or without me. And this is a realization in humility. So all of this is to say the Tao is sourced in nature. Nature is sourced in the Tao. The Tao requires only itself. It is the ultimate in self-sufficiency. And when we define the Tao as everything, it then becomes obvious that it requires nothing outside of itself, since everything is already in the Tao. This is why Lao Tzu says the Tao is independent. Independent and changeless, the ultimate in self-sufficiency, the highest possible level of independence. We are now getting close to the top of the hour, so we have to jump to the summary for today. The previous summary that we looked at is this right here, talking about the characteristics of the Tao. The Tao is formless. The Tao is the source of all things. The Tao is constant and unchanging. And the way we describe it is that the Tao is the principle of change, the only constant of existence. Just like when we say the only constant is change, the only thing that never changes is change itself. Today, we delve deeper into number 4, circular. Everything in the Tao traverses in circles, great and small. And we talked about how this is true in everything, every aspect of life, certainly in us. And the point that I made today is that it is also true for human consciousness. And then lastly, nameless. Tao is just a label of convenience. And today we talked about the fundamental connectedness in all the different levels of reality. We talked about humans following the laws of the earth. And that's because we're earthbound. We have to work within the limits of our environment. Number 2, earth follows the laws of heaven. Everything in the world follows heavenly timing of the universe, that universal choreography and coordination. Heaven follows the laws of the Tao. Everything in the universe follows a certain way that we can sense. Even if we don't know what the natural laws are, we can be dimly aware that it all makes sense. We just have to figure it out. And then Tao follows nature. The Tao follows nature just as nature follows the Tao. The most important interpretation of this is that when we cultivate the Tao, we seek to follow the Tao. The Tao follows nature, and therefore, you and I have to walk the path of naturalness. We'll delve into that topic next time. Share the Tao. The easiest way to access Tao resources is to visit my author website, DerekLin.com. There, you can click on links and go to the web page where you will find everything listed, such as Taoism.net with information about the Tao and also about this meeting. Our Facebook community where you can ask questions or discuss your thoughts on the Tao with others. Our YouTube channel where you can watch recordings of all our previous meetings. My Amazon author page where you can find books and audiobooks for your continuing exploration. You can go directly with the web address dereklin.com/links, as you can see. You can use these resources to share the Tao with the people you know who may be interested. When you see the benefits of Tao cultivation in your life, you can share your experience with others through your comment in Facebook or YouTube. If you find my books or audiobooks to be helpful, you can post your reviews on Amazon to help others discover the Tao. This is the path that I am on, so I can say sharing the Tao has benefited me personally in every aspect of life. I would like to invite you to come along with me to share the Tao. Let us travel together on the path in the journey of life. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.